Hi, I'm Bobby Kennedy, and I'm an acolyte of Al Gore's, and I believe I'm his biggest fan in the world. He's my hero, and I just want to say this, that I wouldn't have come here tonight if I knew Charles Grodin was going to be here. And it's because about 12 or 15 years ago, I just published a book called River Keepers, and he invited me onto his talk show, which was one of the most popular talk shows at the time, and a job that he truly loved and was very good at. It was on NBC. And my book was largely about how General Electric Company had destroyed the Hudson River. And he let me ramble on about that for about a half an hour, and he got a call from Jack Welch the next day telling him he was fired. Oh, every time I see him, he says to me, "You lost me the best job I've ever had." And that's relevant to what Al Gore is doing for our country today, which is to rebuild a communication system that is a people system. It's a system that serves our democracy rather than becomes the servant of power. But Al Gore spent his lifetime, as a visionary, as a person of courage. This video that was showed of my father at the beginning of this wonderful dinner showed him opposing the Vietnam War. He had in the early days, a couple of senators who were his partners. One was Mike Mansfield, of course, and the other was Al Gore Sr., who later lost his job in the Senate because of his opposition to the war. More extraordinary, he had a son who also opposed the war, who saw that the people who were being asked to fight the war were the poorest members of our society. They were coming from black neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods, and they couldn't get the educational deferment that was available to people like him and the rest of us. So he decided to just sign up and join and go fight that war, even though he didn't believe in it. And there's very, very few people who had that kind of courage. Most people that age were thinking of ways to get out of going to Vietnam. But he did something that was extraordinarily courageous. And I've watched him over the past 20 years fight a battle against the most powerful interests on our planet, being vilified in a $200 million campaign funded by the carbon cronies, by Big Oil, by Exxon Corporation, by Chevron, by Massey Coal, by the Koch brothers, and many others. At the center point of that campaign has been to vilify Al Gore, because he was the one person who stood up, and they've created all these think tanks in Washington, D.C. They filled them with these phony tobacco scientists, we call them biostitutes, and they've loaded the airwaves and everybody else, and they've convinced half the American people that global warming is not a problem. The only reason the other half understand that there is science out there, is because of what Al Gore has done, has sacrificed so much of the comfort that he could have had during his lifetime to try to save this planet and to save our civilization, to save and preserve American values in future generations. And he's done this, and he's one of the first people that was able to articulate the notion of environmental justice, that democracy and the environment are intertwined, that the people who suffer most from environmental injury, that shoulder the disproportionate burden of environmental injury, are always the poorest members of our society. And he was one of the first people to understand that in a democracy can only function if you have an informed and educated public. And we've seen this devolution of the American press. It began in 1988 when the fairness doctrine was abolished in this country, and the airwaves, the broadcasters, which don't own the airwaves, they can be licensed to use them. But the license used to impose, we've had a law since 1928 that said if you want that license, you've got to serve the American public. You've got to advance democracy, promote democracy, and advance and inform the public. And after 1988, that law was abandoned, and broadcasters no longer had any obligation except to service their shareholders. And they fired 80% of investigative reporters, have lost their jobs since then on the public airwaves. They got rid of all of their foreign news bureaus. When I was a boy, ABC alone had 47 foreign news bureaus in Europe. Today they have 0. And the airwaves no longer have an obligation to the public interest, to serve the public interest. So they serve their shareholders by entertaining us rather than informing us. And they do that by appealing to the prurient interest. By appealing to the prurient interest that all of us have in the reptilian core of our brains for sex and celebrity gossip. So we today are the best entertained and least informed people on the face of the earth. And we know a lot about Brad and Jen and Brad and J-Lo and Brad and Angelina, but almost nothing about global warming. And what we do know is the result of Al Gore, an inconvenient truth in the battle that he has fought to serve the American public. So I want to thank Al Gore for not only fighting for our environment, but fighting to preserve our democracy as well. And his new network, Current, which is launching a great new show today, is the greatest hope for both our democracy and the environment. And I want to thank him.